The day began as usual. The sky was clear and the air was cool. It smelled like a shower. After school, Mia, a girl who loves being outside, was walking home when she saw something at the edge of a nearby pond. It was a turtle. At first, it looked like nothing was wrong. A small animal with green shells relaxing in the sun. Its eyes sparkled as Mia walked in front of it, and she felt drawn to it. Mia said, "You look so lonely out here." It didn't run away, the turtle. Instead, it stretched its neck toward her as if it knew she was there. It moved slowly and carefully, as if it were picking her out just as much as she was picking it out. Mia looked around because she thought she saw water close, but the creek was almost dry. It was softly picked up by her and she said, "You can't stay here." Its shell was smooth and strong when she touched it. As Mia brought the turtle home, she looked at the patterns on its shell. With their thin lines and curves that barely sparkled in the sun, they were not random. She tilted her head in surprise at how different it looked. A small smile played across her lips as she said, "You're unique, aren't you?" When Mia got home, she rushed inside carrying the turtle like it was a gift. It made her happy, and she yelled, "Mom, look what I found!" Her mother looked up from the kitchen sink and turned around. Her mom asked her what she had told her about bringing home stray animals. However, Mia's mother gave in after being pushed. She looked at him sharply and said, "Fine, but it's your job." Mia set up a small tank right away in her room. She put rocks, water, and a small heat lamp in a way that looked like the turtle's natural environment. The turtle was named Teddy by her. "Welcome to your new home, Teddy," she said as she watched it look around. Everything seemed fine at first. Teddy quickly got used to his new environment, and he often climbed up on the rocks to enjoy the sun. Mia loved watching him because the way he moved slowly and carefully made her feel calm. But after a few days, something changed. Teddy began to grow very quickly. At first, Mia thought it was all in her head. She asked herself, "Maybe I didn't notice how big you were before." Without a doubt, Teddy was bigger by the end of the week. She could barely hold the turtle in her hands when it was palm-sized. When Mia's mom saw him again, she raised an eyebrow. She asked Mia if she was sure this was okay. Mia wasn't sure what to do because she was afraid her mom would make her give up the turtle. So, she said she believes it's normal and that turtles grew. Her mom let out a sigh. She told Mia to watch out for him. She told her that something needs to be done if he keeps getting bigger like this. By the end of the second week, Teddy was too big for his tank. He had strong arms and legs that pressed against the glass. His shell, which had been thin and green, looked thicker and darker now. Mia told herself that this wasn't normal, and he wasn't meant to be growing like that. She was both interested and scared. A glass broke when Mia was asleep. With her heart beating fast, she ran straight ahead. She gasped as she turned on the lamp next to her bed. Teddy had broken his tank. The broken glass was on the floor in sharp bits, and water was collecting around the frame. Teddy sat in the middle of the mess, his shell shining heavily in the lamplight. He was now about the size of a small dog. Mia got chills when she looked into his weakly shining eyes. With her heart beating fast, she said, "Oh my God!" The turtle moved slowly and carefully as it turned its head toward her. For the first time, Mia felt a little anxious. It seemed to be studying her by the way it treated her. Being careful not to raise her voice, she told him, "You're too big for this tank." She put him softly in the bathtub and added water to make him feel better. As Mia watched him get into the tub, she had a strange feeling. His shell used to be smooth and green, but now it had sharp edges and big bumps. He had claws that were longer and stood out more. In a soft voice, she seemed to be asking him, "What's wrong with you, Teddy?" It made her nervous to think about what was happening with the turtle because she had no idea what was going on either. Mia and her mom both decided that it was time to get help from a professional the next morning. Teddy was put in a big plastic bag and driven to the veterinarian in the neighborhood. Dr. Lane smiled warmly to greet them and was a vet with decades of experience. "So, what seems to be the problem?" she asked. Mia thought for a moment and looked at the container. She said he got too big too quickly and broke his tank last night. Dr. Lane laughed because she thought it was a joke. When she opened the box, though, her smile went away. Her eyes got bigger, and she agreed that what was wrong with the turtle was wrong in every way. She looked at Teddy very carefully, running her hands over his shell and arms. On the first try, she looked confused. As she went on, though, her face changed into one of worry. Dr. Lane said in a serious voice, "This isn't normal." Mia's mom frowned, also not understanding. "What do you mean? What's wrong with him?" The vet took a while to answer. With the help of a magnifying glass, she looked closely at the detailed patterns on Teddy's shell. She finally said, "I need to do some tests. Could you leave him here for a while?" Teddy looked back at Mia with those beautiful golden eyes. She reluctantly agreed. In the late afternoon, the doctor called them again. Mia felt sick to her stomach when she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but heavy. It was impossible for her to get rid of the feeling that something was wrong. Dr. Lane welcomed them when they got back to the hospital later, saying with urgent that they need to look at something. She then took them to a separate room. There were different x-rays and lab results on the desk, and each one had a red note on it. In a sad voice, Dr. Lane said, "Teddy doesn't seem to be just a turtle." Mia could feel her breath getting short. She asked, "What do you mean?" The vet showed the x-rays with his hand. His genetic markers and the way his bones are built are both unusual. They don't look like any turtle species that is known. Mia's mom's face turned pale. "What does that mean?" Dr. Lane thought for a moment before saying. "It means that his genes have been changed. It didn't look like this would happen naturally." It made Mia's heart race as she looked at Teddy. When he looked back at her, with his calm, innocent golden eyes, he didn't seem to notice the chaos going on around him. Who would do this, and why? Mia spoke softly. The vet just shook her head. "I'm not sure. He's still growing, though, no matter what he is." When days turned into weeks, Teddy's growth was hard to miss. He went from being very regimented to being much less stable. He began to scratch at the walls of his enclosure with shocking force, making deep holes in the material. His deep, gruff moans woke Mia and her family up at night in the garage. It looked like Teddy was also very hungry. No matter how much they gave, it was never enough. One night, Mia was scared as Teddy pushed his weight against the stronger cage, making the metal squeak dangerously under the weight. Her mother warned her, sounding both angry and scared that he would lose it if this kept up. Finally, Mia's family had to call wildlife officials in the area. Within hours, a group of people in suits and lab coats showed up. They looked sad as they took a look at the situation. Teddy watched them through the glass in a disturbingly quiet way. Mia stood to the side in silence, while the experts set up their tools to study the creature. A tall man with a notebook looked at her with a serious face while he was with the researchers. He made it very clear that they had to move it to a safe place. Her heart stopped beating. She asked in a broken voice, "Are you taking him away?" "It's for everyone's safety," the man said. But his voice didn't sound comforting. When Mia looked at Teddy, tears began to form in her eyes. He had been her friend and someone she could count on. He was then taken away from her because he was thought to be dangerous. As the team got ready to move Teddy, he let out a low growl and looked at Mia with his golden eyes. He looked like he knew what was going on and was upset about it. As Teddy was taken by authorities to a research center, Mia and her mom were shocked. It was painful to remember what they had lost when they were away from their once quiet house. A few days later, a government official showed up at their door. He looked serious as he got ready to tell them the shocking truth. The man started in a formal tone. "Teddy seems to be the result of an illegal genetic experiment." Mia clenched her hands together and stared at him. Illegal? Did someone mean to hurt him this way? The official looked straight ahead and nodded. We think he got away from or was let out of a nearby lab that was doing experiments on snakes. After feeling angry for a while, Mia asked him, "That means it's your fault? You built him?" The man stuttered and turned away from her. He told them they don't have all the answers yet. Still, they are doing everything they can to make things go their way. Mia's mother spoke up, her voice high. "You're telling me that my daughter saw your mistake, and now you're trying to punish us?" The man groaned and stroked the back of his neck. He tried to tell her that he knew how this looked, but Teddy's changes were very dangerous. If nothing is done to stop his growth, he could upset local ecosystem or do something even worse. Mia shook her head, and tears filled her eyes. "He's not a bad guy. He's just mixed up. Scared." The man's face turned soft for a second. He told her that he knew it was hard, but they had to do it to keep everyone safe, even Teddy. He said they would do everything they could to keep him safe. Mia didn't feel better after hearing what he said. She felt guilty all the time and couldn't get rid of it. Was it a bad idea for her to bring Teddy home that day? Scientists at the research center worked hard all day to figure out why Teddy was growing so quickly and acting in strange ways. High-tech cameras lined the walls of his huge cage and watched him move all the time. Teddy looked at the scientists with bright eyes that seemed to be just as interested in them as they were in him. What they found shocked everyone. Not only did Teddy get bigger, but his genes also changed to include traits from extinct lizard species that hadn't been seen in millions of years. One researcher, his voice full of wonder as he said, "It's like he's part dinosaur." But these things also came with risks. Because Teddy was getting so much stronger, he was acting in more surprising ways. In a meeting, a very learned scientist said, "If this animal gets out into the wild, it could mess up whole ecosystems." In the meantime, Mia fought the weight of her decisions. She thought about all the time she had spent with Teddy. She told her mother about it one night with tears in her eyes. She said she only wanted to help him. Her mother put her hand on her shoulder to comfort her. She said in a nice way, "You didn't know. You did the right thing by trying to save him." Mia wasn't sure if she still believed that, though. It was hard to hear each news from the facility because it made us think that Teddy might never be free again. Scientists tried hard, but Teddy's growth didn't seem to be slowing down. Even reinforced cages were barely able to hold him, and he started acting in more and more strange ways. He slammed his huge body against the walls of his pen, making loud growls that could be heard throughout the building. "Should this continue, we will not be able to retain him here," a scientist informed at a meeting. "It isn't worth it given the very great stakes involved." The authorities had to decide if Teddy could be saved or whether he was too dangerous to keep alive. It was brought up that he might need to be put to sleep. Mia could not stand the thought of losing him. She begged to be able to speak for him, and as she spoke to the group of officials, her voice was shaking. With tears in her eyes, she went on to say that he's not a monster. He's just strange. He didn't choose to be this way. Others weren't moved by what she said, but some were. Time was running out, and the situation grew progressively hopeless. Mia's mother hugged her tightly later that evening and told her, "No matter what happens, you've done everything you could." Finally, a deal was reached. Teddy would be sent to a nature shelter in the middle of nowhere so he could spend his days alone and without people. The choice was hard because it meant ending Teddy's relationship with Mia, but giving him a second chance at life. Mia had one last chance to see him before he was taken away. Teddy's golden eyes locked on hers as she stood in front of his huge cage. She felt the same bond she did the day she found him, even though he was big and wild. She put her shaking hand on his shell as tears ran down her face. She said in a whisper, "I'm sorry, Teddy. I hope everything goes well for you." Teddy made a low noise that sounded a lot like a purr, as if to comfort her. He was carefully put into a huge holding vehicle by the transport team. As Mia watched the truck drive off into the distance, her heart broke with each mile it went. A few months later, the refugee sent Mia a letter. Teddy did well getting used to his new home, and even though he was still being watched, he seemed happy. The picture that was sent showed him lying in the sun in a large, safe area. Mia smiled through her tears as she held on tight to the letter. For her, the experience was a bittersweet lesson of how important it is to protect nature and what can happen when you mess with it. Sometimes, the smallest animals can make the biggest difference.